Thank you everyone, and good morning. Just make some room here for my sheet notes. Okay, so changing slides.
Go backwards. No, backwards.
No, that was the right way. Keep going back the other way.
Keep going.
Yeah, and then the next one. There you go.
Okay, I'm going to talk about three things this morning. The first is what the Mining Industry Participation Office is and the function it performs within the Department of State Development. I'm going to touch on a few of the general, very high-level trends that we're seeing in the value chain across the resources sector. And right at the end, just touch on some of the business support services that are available within government. And that's often an area that is a bit of a black hole because there's so much available, but I'm going to try and simplify that a little bit. I guess to open up this whole discussion, I wanted to set a bit of a pretext in that South Australia has 143,000 businesses. So if we just think about that for a second in terms of economic development, there are 143,000 businesses within South Australia. 65% of those businesses, or 93,000 of them, are sole operators, they're sole traders. 32% of them are small businesses that employ between 1 and 19 people. Now, if you add those two numbers together, it doesn't leave too many, does it? 2.3% of the businesses we have here employ between 20 and 199 people, and only 0.1%, or 178 businesses in South Australia, employ more than 200 full-time equivalent people. So from the perspective of transitioning an economy and adopting a digital strategy, you can see that it's quite a complex transition that we're talking about here, especially when we're trying to introduce such a radical expansion in the copper industry. So the subject that I'm going to talk about is some of the themes that we're seeing are driving this expansion, but I wanted you to keep in the back of your mind the challenge of having so many small businesses in the state and helping those businesses transition. Alrighty, I'll get the knack of this in a minute. At a very high level, mining equipment and technology suppliers are recognised at both a state and federal level. So at a federal level, we have 5 growth sectors that have been identified by the federal government, and mining equipment and technology services is one of them. It's interesting to note that a lot of the services that operate in this sector here also transition over into some of these other sectors. So it's not as easy to just distinctly classify businesses in those 5 sectors. But it's important to note that the mining services have made the grade in terms of being recognised at a federal level of importance. At a state level, we have 10 economic priorities. The top one is developing our resources, energy resources. And within that, there are a number of objectives assigned by the Premier for us to work towards. One of the objectives we have is specifically assigned to developing supply chains. And when I get the knack of this, that objective is to position South Australia to become a leading mining and energy services hub for the nation. Now, MIPO, or the Mining Industry Participation Office, was set up in 2013 to help assist that process. Essentially, the Mining Industry Participation Office is about bringing together the right academic efforts and helping businesses develop the right value propositions for what we need going forward. In order to make sure we're developing the right sort of programs and supporting the right sort of businesses, we have an advisory council that consists of a number of executives from companies like BHP and Santos and Beach and Cooper Energy. We have some industry bodies like Ostmine and SACOM represented on this advisory council. We work very closely with Phil DeCourcy and RESA, and we have some suppliers on the council as well. Having spent so long in the private sector, I feel it's very important that we test the work that we're going to do with people that are actually working in the sector. So we test our ideas with the advisory council, and they very quickly tell us whether they're ideas that actually hold merit and are good examples of public expenditure. Of course, having a statement like position South Australia to become a leading mining, energy and services hub for the nation is all good, but being an engineer at heart, I want to measure what that actually means. And so I set about trying to come up with a set of baseline measurables or parameters that tell us how the sector is actually going and how it compares around Australia. Now, I'll try and summarise this quickly, but essentially, in terms of contribution to GDP nationally, mining and equipment services are worth about $80 billion. In South Australia, contributes about $3 billion of that $80 billion. So you can see this is a very big sector, but we're a very small part of it. In terms of employment, nationally, the sector employs about 400,000 people. Now that goes up and down. We all understand that there are trends in the resources sector, but it's the relative size that matters here and what I'm trying to draw your attention to. In South Australia, we float around the 15,000 mark. Now these are tier ones and tier twos, okay? Not people directly employed by mines. In terms of export revenue, as a percentage of total revenue, we actually play pretty well on the level playing field with the national average. So about 10% of total revenue generated in METS is export revenue. So we're using these numbers here as a guideline for how we're tracking and how the state is tracking to establish it as a mining services hub, with the overall goal of making the services, mining services at least meet the national average. So in terms of contribution to GSP, we want to push our contribution from 3% to 5%, from 2% to 4%, and excuse my back if I'm sort of going backwards and forwards here, it's a bit of a ping pong game between two screens. So we want to go from 2% to 4% for employment, and we'd love to push the export revenue value from 10% to 15% by 2025. Not an easy target, as the fluctuation of commodity prices goes up and down, but we're convinced that the adoption of technology and the competitive advantage that that brings in an offering is the key to expanding the industry. Oh boy, if my wife was here, she'd be paying me out for not having worked out the direction of this yet, not to mention my 12-year-old son. So within the Mining Industry Participation Office, we run 2 or 3 different programs. There is the Industry Capability Network that is about connecting businesses with opportunities that exist right now. There is a program called the Mining Petroleum Services Centre of Excellence that's been running for 3 years, and that program is about commercialising new technologies or investing in strategic academic research. This slide provides a bit of a summary of some of the businesses that have been successful and some of the research that we've supported over the last 3 years, and I thought it would give a bit of a taste about the sort of direction that supply chains are heading in. And it's not particular to minerals this morning. I wanted to cover, include oil and gas as well, because it's important to pick up on what businesses are doing rather than being restrictive just to a particular sector. So in terms of Tonsley, we have an onshore oil and gas training facility here in the building right across the road here now. That's a collaboration between Santos, Beach and Cenex, and this is a training facility that industry has established itself in collaboration with TAFE. It allows us to train onshore, above ground capabilities away from site, so operators are more ready when they go on site. LaserBond, a local company who has established a hard coding technology, has now partnered up with Bort Longyear and developing some reciprocating hammer technologies and looking at the hard codings of those hammers and working closely with them, and that has certainly taken off in the last 6 months. Dr. Vinay Shuram will talk to you a little bit about his IPAC's remote operations centre, and certainly that had, we helped Vinay in the early days of establishing that. The copper uranium transformation hub run out of the University of Adelaide, where Dr. Stephen Grano is around here somewhere. There he is over there. Plays a very important part in understanding how we remove radionuclides from copper concentrates, and it's really a strategic investment in research. Lab SA, a very small materials testing laboratory out in Salisbury, has decided to branch into proppant testing. Now, for those of you that don't know what proppant is, it's the little granules of sand used in the oil and gas industry when they hydraulically fracture a well. Testing the properties of that proppant is very important, because having the right properties allows us to control the fracture mechanics along the way. So I'm very proud to say that we have, for the first time in Australia, a proppant testing facility right here in Adelaide. And of course Imtech, some of you may have heard of Imtech. They've developed a crushing technology that allows wet or dry crushing without any grinding media, and a power saving of up to 30%. So they've developed a couple of different models and are now in commercial trials. And those commercial trials are confidential, and I can't talk too much about them, but that's all happened in 12 months. They've gone from a benchtop trial to commercial trials with large tier ones in 12 months. So this stuff can happen, and it can happen right here in South Australia. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I wanted to spend just a few minutes on looking at the value chain and really just reflect on some of the high-level themes that I'm seeing. This is way too big a subject for me to lecture on the digital opportunities in every part of the value chain, but over the last 3 years I wanted to reflect on some of the things that I've seen in each one of those sections of the value chain. The overwhelming theme, though, is the businesses that are doing well have a digital strategy. They are thinking about how technology is going to influence their business going forward. That is common right across every part of the value chain. Certainly in mineral exploration, it is all about getting information in real time. We want to reduce the amount of time it takes to make a decision. And so what I have noticed, and what the team that I work with has noticed, is that tier ones that were traditionally offering drilling services are now turning into data acquisition companies. They're turning into companies that can help explorers make decisions on the spot. And so the theme there is all about understanding the data that is coming up from underground. There is some fantastic work being done at the Depth CRC already in that regard, but global tier ones are interested in commercialising that and taking that to the next step. And so the importance of partnerships with those global tier ones to give them the specific technologies in analytics or hard coding of drills so they can last underground a bit longer are the sort of partnerships where there's opportunities for South Australian companies to develop going forward. In terms of feasibility studies and financing, I find this one actually one of the most interesting ones of all of them, because it sort of sits, you talk about financing and feasibility studies at the beginning of a project, and then unless you're working for the company, you don't sort of hear it spoken about a lot from that point onwards. I've noticed that balance sheets for large companies are tending, or successful companies I should say, are tending to hold a lot more intellectual property as an intangible asset, and tangible assets are starting to not so much reduce, but IP is starting to increase. So what that is saying to me is that companies that have more IP are able to customise their solutions to the industry. And how the ramifications of that in the finance industry are very interesting. We are beginning to see exchanges like the Toronto Stock Exchange, which is one of the top 3 minerals exchanges in the world, beginning to push money into technology companies. Now I've got some numbers here that are worth quoting. So technology and innovation sectors have been the fastest growing sectors on the TSX since 2013. They are now collectively valued at $250 billion. That is more than the aggregate value of the mining sector on that exchange. So what that is saying is that the money is heading into these technology companies and the tier ones that are supporting that. In the future, I'm beginning to think that financiers are going to look for process solutions that are off the shelf. So really smart suppliers are going to partner together to provide process solutions that allow the processing plant in a mine to potentially come off the balance sheet and actually be provided as a service, perhaps even renting processes. So thinking about some of those things it should be at the front of mind, because I can guarantee you financiers are thinking like that now. In terms of mine development, there's no secret that we operate, this sector operates in harsh environments, remote locations, and the human element of FIFO is ever present. Modular construction, I think, will play a very big role, an increasing role in developing mines. What will be important is for suppliers to adopt an early contractor involvement model. So we need to get to the point where some of the smaller businesses that operate in this sector are getting involved in the design of mines earlier on. And actually, one of the initiatives that we have running is called Advanced Modular Solutions, is being run presently out of WSP Parsons Brinkerhoff by Nick Flanagan, is attempting to do just that, to inject our local supply chain into the design phase a lot earlier on. But again, this initiative here is all about possibly moving towards rent a plant one day. Now, I know it sounds like it can't really happen, but trust me, there are businesses in South Australia already working on this. All processing technologies is one of them. Mine operations, well, this is Dr. Vinay Shriram's area, and I won't spoil his thunder, but we are moving from remote operations to predictive analytics. There is no doubt about that. It's coming, and it's coming like a train in our direction. Santos seems to be leading the way in South Australia in this area. They have already implemented a predictive analytics group within their headquarters here in Adelaide, and they have demonstrated that they can reduce costs. The biggest challenge in this sector is finding the right people. So what we need is a combination of, I would call them engineers that understand the coalface problems, with people who can write the sort of software and the sort of algorithms that can, model what might happen with that asset. So it's a very unique skill set, and Santos themselves have told me that they're finding difficulty in finding the right sort of people there. So a bit of a tip there if any of you have children that are looking like they want to head in the engineering software development area. Predictive analytics is definitely going to play a very large role going forward. And finally, probably an area that I know least about, but certainly playing an increasing role, is the area of rehabilitation and environmental control. The theme that I've picked up here over the last 12 months is traditionally most of the larger mining companies have been able to afford software packages that allow them to control their obligations, their environmental obligations. Just recently, over the last 6 months, I'm seeing some of those companies able to now offer those services to the smaller tier 2 mining companies. So we're seeing a permeation out into the smaller companies that are able to buy the software that allows them to control their environmental obligations. I'm not going to go on too much longer with any further detail, but I just wanted to summarise all of what I've spoken about with one key point. I was at a talk the other day, and somebody from Atom Internet was up talking about the history of how he started the company, and was talking to us a little bit about how Internet Protocol has evolved over the last few years. Now, all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Internet Protocol addresses and the groups of 3 numbers that form I guess the standard that Internet communicates with, or the address system that Internet communicates with, and that's called IPv4. Okay. Now, I found out last week that IPv4 is moving to IPv6. Now, what that means is that IPv4 can now deliver 4.3 billion addresses. IPv6 will be able to deliver 340 by 10 to the power of 36 addresses. That means that every square millimetre of the Earth's surface can have an IP address. That's telling you something about where technology is heading. So just encourage you to keep that in the back of your mind, and as we move forward and hear about the other presenters today. I was going to go through some of the programs, but I won't, because I sense that I've probably gone over my time. I'm going to hang around this morning. If any of you want to speak to me about any of the programs that come out of government, please see me personally. Essentially, they fall into three categories: helping you find the right research, helping you commercialise a technology, or helping you with some sort of loan guarantee. They're the three categories of help that come out of DSD. On that note, thank you very much, and sorry for going over time.